In the glossy, perfectly curated world of televangelism, few families have been as recognizable or as scrutinized as the Swaggerts. For decades, Jimmy Swaggart and his descendants have stood on stages, preached fiery sermons, sung hymns that brought audiences to tears, and presented themselves as shining examples of Christian morality. Yet behind every camera angle, behind every polished broadcast, there has always been the unspoken question, what really goes on behind closed doors? And now, for the first time, someone from within the family itself has dared to speak. That someone is Jill Swaggart. Jill, the elegant yet often understated wife of Gabriel Swaggart, has long been known as the poised figure singing with the family worship center singers, smiling in church services, appearing as the very image of harmony and devotion. But Jill's shocking revelations, recently made public, have shattered that carefully maintained illusion. Because Jill isn't just speaking about her own marriage. She has decided to expose Donnie Swaggart himself, Gabriel's father, and the truth she claims she has lived through while under the same family roof. What Jill has revealed is explosive, heartbreaking, and for many of the faithful, almost unbelievable. For years, she stayed silent, smiling when she needed to smile, nodding along when cameras were rolling, and pretending that everything was fine. But now she insists the truth can no longer be buried. According to Jill, Donnie Swaggart's behavior toward her was not what the public thought. What seemed like a supportive father-in-law was, in her words, a controlling force that turned my life upside down. And when she finally broke her silence, the floodgates opened. The perfect illusion. To understand the impact of Jill's words, you first have to understand how meticulously the Swaggart family has worked to protect their image. Jimmy Swaggart's empire was born in fire and scandal. After his infamous downfall in the late 1980s and 1990s, the family rebuilt itself on one principle above all: never let the public see you bleed. Every interview, every broadcast, every smiling photo was designed to convey one thing: unity. Donnie Swaggart, Jimmy's only son, became the heir to the pulpit. Though not as fiery as his father, Donnie projected strength, charisma, and a kind of boldness that many churchgoers admired. Gabriel, his son, was the new generation, packaged as a fresh face, with a young family, symbolizing the bright future of the ministry. And Jill, as Gabriel's wife, was meant to be the crown jewel of that image: beautiful, talented, devoted, and above all, silent. But behind that silence, Jill says, was years of pain. Jill's words shake the room. In her emotional statement, words that have spread like wildfire across private church circles, online forums, and whispered conversations, Jill declared, "I can't keep quiet anymore. For too long, I let them dictate my life. For too long, I smiled on stage when I was breaking inside. And Donnie, he was at the center of it all. The things he did, the things he said. I lived in fear. People think they know him, but they don't. They have no idea what I went through standing in that house, in that family." Her voice, reportedly trembling as she spoke, cracked open decades of secrecy. Church members, used to seeing Jill as a picture of calm devotion, were stunned. How could she say such things about Donnie, a man still preaching on Sundays? How could she risk tearing apart the Swaggart image so publicly? But Jill wasn't done. "He controlled everything about me." According to Jill, Donnie's behavior wasn't just difficult, it was invasive, manipulative, and at times, humiliating. He wanted to control everything about me: how I dressed, how I spoke, even how I sang. If I didn't measure up to his idea of the ministry's image, I was reminded, harshly. And when I tried to push back, the threats would start. Not physical threats, but spiritual ones. "Do you want to be the reason this ministry collapses?" He used God as a weapon against me. These words sent chills down the spines of those who heard them. For decades, critics of televangelists have accused leaders of manipulating followers through fear. But for Jill to claim that same manipulation was happening inside the family, behind closed doors, made it far more personal. Gabriel's silence. Perhaps the most shocking detail in Jill's reveal was what she said about her own husband, Gabriel. He knew, he saw, maybe not everything, but enough. And he stayed silent, because he was afraid of his father. I begged him to stand up for me, to draw a line, but he wouldn't. He said, "Jill, you don't understand. This is bigger than us." But what could be bigger than your wife's pain? Those words hit like a bombshell. Gabriel, the young preacher seen as the future of the Swaggart empire, now painted by Jill as a man who sacrificed his wife's well-being for the sake of preserving his father's approval. Church members who adored Gabriel were left speechless. Could this really be true? Could the family first man of God have turned his back on his own wife just to protect his father's image? Donnie's public persona versus Jill's reality. What makes Jill's expose so devastating is the contrast. To the world, Donnie Swaggart has always been the loud, confident voice of revival. He shouts from the pulpit about sin, righteousness, holiness, and the dangers of the modern world. He carries himself like a man unafraid of judgment, insisting on absolute obedience to God's word. But Jill describes a different man. A man who, according to her, used his power not to protect, but to control. A man who allegedly treated her like a prop, someone to sing when needed, smile when cameras rolled, and stay silent otherwise. If I ever disagreed, I was told I was being rebellious. If I cried, I was told I was weak. And if I even hinted at walking away, I was reminded that I would destroy not just Gabriel, but the entire ministry. He made me believe that leaving was a sin against God himself. These are not small accusations. For someone like Donnie, whose credibility rests entirely on his reputation, Jill's words are devastating. The church reacts. As Jill's expose spread, reactions poured in. Some were horrified, devastated that a family they trusted could harbor such dysfunction. Others, however, were skeptical, accusing Jill of exaggeration or even fabrication. Donnie may be strict, but abusive? No way, one church member insisted online. Another, however, countered, "You don't know what happens in that family. We've all seen how tight-lipped they are. If Jill is speaking now, it's because she can't take it anymore." I believe her. And then there were those who turned their anger on Gabriel. How could Gabriel let this happen? Your wife comes before your father. That's in the Bible. How could he let her suffer in silence? The divide grew sharper as more people weighed in. The burden of silence. Why didn't Jill speak sooner? That's the question many asked. And her answer was as heartbreaking as it was telling. Because I was afraid of losing my marriage, afraid of losing my children, afraid of being cast out of the only world I knew. For years, I thought maybe it was just me. Maybe I wasn't strong enough, maybe I was imagining it, but I wasn't. And now, I know I can't protect them by staying silent. It wasn't just a story about Jill. It was a story about every person who's ever been silenced inside a system that values image over truth. The echoes of Jill's confession had barely settled before the walls of the Swagert empire began to tremble. Once she broke her silence, there was no turning back. The family that had thrived on keeping their problems hidden suddenly found themselves in the crosshairs of judgment. Not from the outside world this time, but from within their own pews, their own congregation, their own supporters. Because Jill had done what no one dared to do before, she named Donnie Swaggart, not as a preacher of truth, but as the source of her pain. Donnie's fury. Those close to the family reported that Donnie was furious. Behind closed doors, he allegedly shouted that Jill was a liar, a manipulator, and a danger to the ministry. In typical Donnie fashion, he didn't respond with humility or reflection. Instead, his instinct was to attack. If she thinks she can tear me down, she's wrong. She's not bringing down this ministry. Not now, not ever, Donnie was overheard saying in one heated family meeting. But the damage was already done. Jill's words were spreading, and no matter how much Donnie tried to deny them, the whispers in the church halls had turned into outright conversations. People who once defended him now looked at him with suspicion. Others who already doubted his character felt validated. And every time Donnie tried to thunder from the pulpit, his words rang hollow in the ears of those who had heard Jill's testimony. Frances Swaggert's fury. If Donnie was furious, Frances was livid. Known as the Iron Matriarch of the Swaggart dynasty, Frances has always prided herself on controlling the narrative. She was there when Jimmy fell from grace in the 1980s, and she stood beside him as they rebuilt their empire. For her, image was everything. So when Jill spoke out, Frances saw it as betrayal of the highest order. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's destroying everything we've built, Frances reportedly snapped. But the truth was, Jill knew exactly what she was doing. She was refusing to let the next generation of Swaggerts repeat the mistakes of the past, where silence and cover-ups allowed abuse and dysfunction to thrive. Still, Frances was not about to let Jill go unpunished. According to insiders, Frances began quietly working behind the scenes to discredit Jill, whispering to church staff that Jill was unstable, even suggesting she was being influenced by outside forces who wanted to destroy the ministry. But every time Frances tried to undermine Jill, the sympathy for Jill only grew stronger. The image of her standing there, trembling yet determined, saying, "He controlled everything about me." That picture was more powerful than Frances's denials. The congregation splits. The family worship center had always prided itself on unity. But now, unity was gone. On one side were the loyalists, those who believed Donnie and Frances could do no wrong. They dismissed Jill's words as exaggeration or even slander. To them, this was just another attack of the devil on God's chosen ministry. On the other side were those who believed Jill. They saw her courage as a sign from God, a sign that the truth was finally breaking free, that the years of secrets and control inside the Swaggart